As a therapist, I look at jiu-jitsu as a therapeutic metaphor as well. The way that I explain it to people is I put myself on the doorstep of death with the power to escape in a tap.
Yeah.
It's just so with, for example, trauma therapy, a person who has experienced a significant amount of trauma, their control is taken away from them and they feel like they're at the doorstep of death every single day almost, depending on what's going on that day. And what jiu-jitsu does is you voluntarily and consciously put yourself or allow somebody to put you into certain situations, or you come into the role knowing that that could happen. There's an option that could happen. But the difference there is you've got the power to tap, to stop that. And where something becomes traumatic is, like, think about it this way. If a person got you into a submission and then you're tapped and he's still going at it, then that's going to be a whole new feeling.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I think about trauma. How do we get to the point where we can teach a person? So from my point of view as a therapist, how can I teach a person to create that tap in their own life and consciously put their selves in positions that are going to move them forward? That's a significant metaphor for
it is. And to be honest, I can't think of any other situation where you could do that. You know what I mean? I think that's where jiu-jitsu is unique. And it goes back to what I was saying before about setting those mini goals. Jiu-jitsu gives you the freedom to set those goals, because if they don't work, you're right, all you have to do is tap. You know, let's say I'm going to work on my single leg takedowns, and every time you go in on a single leg, someone gets you in a guillotine and rips your head off. You just stop, and then you go again, and you stop, and you go again, stop. But you're right, that's not afforded to people who don't do jiu-jitsu. I find that the problem solving that you experience in jiu-jitsu in those stressful situations equips you for problem solving that you'll need to have in the outside world. Like, I can't remember the last time I got angry. And as a kid, as a teenager, I was a terror. I used to get so angry. And I think jiu-jitsu has given me those problem solving skills to think, hey, anger's not an option. I can figure this out a different way. But with what you're saying with trauma therapy, it's kind of reverse. Like, they don't have that. So I understand what you're saying. It would be great to find a way to teach someone that. But the trick is, can you get trauma patients to come to jiu-jitsu? You know what I mean?
Well, I've been trying to conceptualize how could I integrate jiu-jitsu from a therapeutic thing, and it's the thoughts are quite in their infancy right now, but I suspect that there could be some sort of integration there. One of the things that people notice within themselves when they've experienced a significant amount of trauma is that they can't trust their own bodies, because their bodies are constantly ripping the rug from underneath them. Their heart's just going all at it when they don't know why. And so to put yourself in a position where you're in someone else's guard and you've experienced something like sexual abuse or something.
It would be big trigger.
So the way that I've conceptualized it is exactly the way that you've mentioned. How can we create small sustainable steps? So even just stepping onto the mat could be that one first thing, and just watching what's actually going on.
That's it. It's a good first step. We often do it with the kids. You know, some kids come in, they get separation anxiety as soon as they walk in the door. So we let the parents sit on the mat with them. And then the next class, the parents will sit off the mat and the kids will just sit and watch. And you just gradually, and you find that once they get into it, that's it. They're hooked. But those first steps are the hardest.
They are. And you mentioned that before, going into it and just taking that step, even before you've gone in, started rolling or sat for a class or started to do some drills, that first step and saying, hey, I'm going to put myself out there. That's one thing that stands out. What would you say the main benefits have been for you over your time since starting? What have you benefited from jiu-jitsu?
I would say mentally, definitely mentally. It is a physical sport, but the biggest battle in jiu-jitsu is in your own head. And it's always like that. You know, you're sparring against other people, But when you spar with other people, most of the time at the end, if you get tapped or you get swept or anything like that, you don't really think about, oh, they were really good. You know, they did this, they did that. You're always thinking, what did I do wrong? I should have done this. I should have done that. And that's what you think about for the whole drive home, or, you know, the whole next day at work or whenever. So it's kind of like the class doesn't end when the class ends, because the class continues in your brain. And one thing I've learned from jiu-jitsu over the years is just to slow down your thinking. Don't overthink things. The higher you get in jiu-jitsu, the more effortless it should be. And I think, again, sounds cliche, but it's a metaphor for your life. It really is. The more experience you get in life, the easier things seem. I often get told at work, like, you never get angry, you never freak out or anything like that. And I work in a primary school, so there's plenty of opportunities for people to freak out. And I just don't let it get to me, because I think there's nothing that life can do that hasn't happened to me on the mats. Like, the mat is, you survive that and you can handle most things. You really can, especially like when we do our comp class. Sometimes we do king of the mat, which is the most horrible thing ever. You know, you lie in the middle of the mat and every minute someone else comes in and they're fresh and you're not. And by the 6th, 7th, 8th minute, you just want to die. But you walk out of there and it's like, well, that's the worst thing that's going to happen to me today. And like, everything else just seems like nothing. So yeah, I'd say the biggest benefit for me has been that mental clarity and being able to slow down my thinking, and just being confident that I can problem solve a lot of things now. Whereas when I started, I probably couldn't.
That's a huge reflection, Wayne. And it's a reflection on what many people that I've spoken to, including myself, benefit from jiu-jitsu, that there is only so much you can think about when somebody's trying to choke you out, or somebody's trying to twist your leg in some god-awful way.
Yep.
You don't have the leisure to think about your bills that are due next day, or your although that's important to remember as well, but all those things that are just not worth your mental
That's right.
effort, all those things that you just overthink, it becomes so much less important. It's almost like when, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but you come up in a plane, you're going up higher and higher and higher, and you start to see everything that's underneath you get smaller and smaller and smaller. And suddenly those problems tend to dissipate the further you are away from them. And we've got this for, say you come in, a class is around 1.5 to 2 hours. You're training probably about 6 hours every single week of intense therapy, pretty much is how I conceptualize it. Physical therapy that has that mental application. So I can definitely see where you're coming from there.
With the plane analogy too, like, it's a funny thing. I always get super nervous when I fly, and I always get super nervous before I compete. And it's the same feeling. Like, when I'm waiting to compete, I'm always super nervous. I know I'm prepared. I know I've done everything right, but it's still just it's the anticipation or whatever it is. And on a plane, like when I'm sitting on the plane, just waiting for it to start moving, I have the same feeling. And when the plane takes off and it's in the air, I'm calm. And it's the same as competing. As soon as I step foot on that mat, I'm calm. And I think it comes down to the point that, like, things you can control, they take up a lot of your focus. You know, for example, at the competition, if I get too nervous, I can easily run out the door. You know, if I'm sitting on the plane and I think it's going to go final destination or something, I can get up and run off the plane. But once you're up in the air or you're on the mat or anything to that degree, it's out of your hands. It's out of your control. And so you can't focus on it. If you focus on things that you can't control, you're going to lose your mind. And with jiu-jitsu, I say to the guys, especially when they're like, how do I escape side control? How do I escape mount? I'm like, don't worry about escaping side control. Worry about improving your position by this much. That's something you can't control. Sometimes you can't control, like when you've got a 120 kilo dude on top of you, but you can make that little bit of space, and then make that next little bit of space, and then make that next little bit of space, and then you're good. So I would say, like, jiu-jitsu as well has taught me just to focus on things that matter and things that I can control at the time. And when it's out of your hands, you just let it go.